Alright, so you need to know all of your AHAs. Oh my god, you guys are so lazy. You need to know the characteristics. Which one has the larger molecule size and which is the smallest. What do you use to neutralize them? What is a superficial chemical exfoliation? What is a deep chemical peel? You guys need to know what absorbs UV light, visible light, and free radicals. You need to know the 2 types of melanin. You need to describe the melanocyte cell. You need to know where the melanosomes are located. You need to know what darker pigmentation looks like under the Woods lamp. And what is it?
We never saw that, by the way.
That actually wasn't bad. I just anticipated it.
Okay, we'll go get the Woods lamp.
Yeah.
You need to know what best describes fibers that lend strength and elasticity. You guys need to know which layer of the skin is avascular. You need to know what layer of the epidermis is referred to as the squamous cell layer. And then remember I told you you're going to have the melanocyte cell and you have to label it.
Like,
remember we drew it on the board?
Can you feel it?
The
what are those
melanocyte
letters?
cell. Those are how you have to label it.
Oh.
So it's going to tell you what's the melanocyte cell, ground substance, melanosomes,
And we put like the
dendrites.
letter where it goes.
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
You need to know what a modified Jesner is.
Okay. Yeah.
You need to know what a hybrid peel is. You need to know what best describes a Jesner solution. You need to know. We went through hybrid peels.
Like when you
What is a hybrid peel?
when you asked about that question, how it's what was it, a salicylic that she asked about? How you can't get a salicylic, but she can, and you
No,
could
it wasn't
get a
salicylic. It was TCA.
TCA.
And Jesner.
And you can take something out of it. That's right.
That's modified.
A hybrid
Isn't that what you
peel
said?
is going to be your Jesners.
Right. So you can take something out of them so that someone can
Because
have
it's the
something.
resourcil that we can take out or put it
But
in.
that is modified, isn't it?
Modified is Jesner.
Right.
No, but okay, the modified, you have your original 17%, and then your modified
go
was
14.
esthetician. Right.
And
So
then the
a hybrid
will be
peel
taking
is your
something-
recessional, yes. All right, you need to know what best describes a Jesner, which is the smallest AHA molecule. What are the characteristics of a BHA? You need to know when applying salicylic, when do you apply the next layer? When do you apply the next layer?
After
When do you apply it?
well, after
Yes.
it frosts. Is it a time?
When they come back down to 0. So remember, you apply the first layer, you wait for them to come back down to 0, and then you apply the second layer. Wait for them to come back to 0, and then you apply your third layer.
Oh, okay. What if they don't come back to necessarily 0? What if
Then
they?
you wait. Otherwise, if they take some more than 5 minutes to come back down to 0,
You should
you're
just
done.
leave that. Okay.
You're done. Resorcinol should. You need to know what skin types you can put it on and when you can't. You
So
need to know
1,
what
2,
necrosis
3.
is.
Proactive.
What is the best ingredient to aid in treating hyperpigmentation? And it's going to give you a bunch of things. You need to pick the best one. Titanium dioxide and zinc are found in what? You need to know that. You need to know where butrin comes from.
He's getting it out.
And that was on our list of things.
Yeah.
You need to know where hydroquinone comes. Do you need to know what hydroquinone is?
And I thought I was bad for
You need to know which bipolymers are rich in nitrogen.
getting cut really nice right here.
You need to know what is the chemical compound that's created when the oxidation process complete when melanin is being formed. You need to know that. Which bipolymers are rich in sulfur. You need to know an overproduction of melanin which results in uneven skin tone. What is that called? You need to know what the pH represents when discussing peels. You need to know what the percentage represents. You need to know what will determine the success of your peel. You need to know an individual skin type. Individual skin depends upon what? You need to know what peel was used in 1903 to treat acne and acne scarring. You need to know The proper timing for a lactic and glycolic solution.
I know so this one's a little bit
You need to describe the histological goal of TCA. You must perform a 24-hour patch test using what? You need to know the two different strengths of hydroquinone. What are they?
Three.
2 and 4%. You guys better say.
2 and 4.
Is what hydroquinone come in. 2% and 4%. You guys better say. Which best describes a deep peel? Phenol, resorcinol, salicylic, or TCA?
TCA.
Really? A deep peel?
Fennel.
Remember we watched the phenol peel?
Oh, phenol, yeah.
You guys better
That was
study.
medium depth.
Come on, you
TCA.
guys better study. Which of the following best describes which chemical exfoliation or plant origin and digest the cells of the stratum corneum? We're going to talk about enzymes tomorrow. You need to know what superficial peels are. You need to know when the epidermis and the dermis separate and a chemical burn transpires. What is that? We just talked about that today. You need to know what best describes a peel ranging from epidermal into the papillary dermis. We talked about that today. What are the contraindications to performing a peel? What considerations should you take before applying a peel? Frosting is the coagulation of protein in the skin, which turns the skin white color. True or false? You need to know that. You need to know what peel is good for the treatment of rosacea. You need to know a condition that is a result of acne, laser peels, chemical peels, dermabrasion, causes darker spots of pigmentation is what? You need to know what dichrosmis is. You need to know what deep peels are. You need to know what must be in your client's intake form. You need to know what very superficial peels are. You need to know what it's called when a rapid loss of color happens. What contributes to the depth of a peel? You need to know that. So pretty much all the slides we went over the past 2 days, most of these questions are going to be on there. You need to know what do you tell your client to expect the day of a treatment? What is most effective in breaking up melasma? If an acid which of the following best describes an acid that's been altered with an alkaline substance that buffers the irritation of the solution? You need to know what that is. You need to know which of the following best describes microdermabrasion? You need to know the benefits of microdermabrasion. You need to know out of microdermabrasion, you learned all the different ones. You need to know which one separates hard tissue from soft tissue. You need to know what procedure is carried out under general or twilight anesthesia, and it's going to give you a list. And then we're going to do Botox and Levulan tomorrow. So you need to know what layer of the skin do we exfoliate during microdermabrasion. You need to know with ultrasonic microdermabrasion, it uses to exfoliate, what does it use to exfoliate the stratum corneum, the ultrasonic, so you need to know that. You need to know what must they sign before performing it. The correct microdermabrasion of treatment, you need to know the pattern. You need to know which of the following must you apply after microdermabrasion. You need to know your grits, which is your least aggressive down to your aggressive. So what would be the least aggressive? What grit number?
220?
Yes. So know that 220 is the least aggressive, and then it goes all the way down.
Yeah.
What do you need to know that's going to give you a choice? Which one would be the ideal for your first time client? Which of the following best describes one pass when performing microdermabrasion? Is it necessary to cleanse the skin twice and use a proper degreaser?
And for the passes, is it like, are they talking about like the north, south, west, east?
Which of the following best describes one pass when performing microdermabrasion? Once over the face in a vertical, once over the face in a parallel, once over the face in any direction as long as you cover the area, and once over the face in a parallel direction, then vertical. So remember what Miss Sarah told you. What would be considered one pass?
Vertical.
Um,
Vertical first.
You need to know what would be the proper post-care instructions for microderm. If a client is not willing to comply to proper home care to wearing SPF at all times, they are not candidates for advanced treatments. True or false?
Smaller head?
You need to know what,
This one or this one?
which of the following acidic solution would you not use pre or post microderm?
We'll see if we can
Well,
shot it.
which of the following acid solutions would you not use pre or post microdermabrasion?
I'll guide you.
Okay.
What temperature?
You need to know the 3 phases of peeling.
Four.
Which of the following best describe the correct way to prescribe the proper acidic solution for your client? Which of the following best describes which technology you may not do right after a chemical peel? We'll talk about Levulon tomorrow. Alright, so remember I told you the chart? This is how it's going to come. These are your questions and you're going to have to label it. So study. Then you need to know the value to performing microderm prior to any advanced treatment. You need to know the corpuscles, that they're located in the dermis and sensory receptors for deep pressure. You need to know what those are, and you need to know what's an adipose site cell.
So study.
So study.